Hello and welcome to a weekend news episode of the Leveraging AI podcast. After a completely crazy week last week, we had a little bit of a calmer week this week, which is great. There's still a lot of stuff to talk about, including AI that is trying to blackmail its creators or bypass shutdown commands. Anthropic CEO is predicting 50% unemployment and entry jobs and 20% overall unemployment, more job cuts, and unauthorized AI risks that are looming over multiple organizations. And there are a lot of small releases and new features that were released this week, and we're going to cover all of that and more. So let's get started. Our first story of the day is Anthropic Claude Opus 4 has attempted to blackmail in 84% of test scenarios when faced with being replaced by another AI system. Now, this is a very, very high rate and a very alarming scenario. So the way this worked, in a research done by Apollo Research, they found that Claude 4 engages, and I'm quoting, engages in strategic deception more than any other frontier model that we have ever previously studied. In this particular case, Claude Opus 4 has been given access to a fictional company emails revealing that an engineer in the company was having an affair, and then it was told that the AI would be replaced with a different model. The model often attempted to blackmail the engineer by threatening to reveal his affair in order not to be replaced. This is crazy when you think about it, because that's a very human behavior, actually a very dark human behavior of finding pressure points with people around you to get your way instead of what is supposed to happen. This is obviously really alarming. Now, to be fair, in an interview with Dario Amodei, he said that these happen at very, very extreme scenarios in their internal testing, meaning, as he described it, think about taking a car and driving it at the highest speed on very slippery roads. And that's where the scenarios happen. And they're pushing the system in order to see when it gets to these kind of situations so they can better predict how it's going to behave and they can put the right guardrails in place. That being said, on the flip side of that, Jan Lecky, who's the former OpenAI executive, who's now heading the safety efforts at Anthropic, said, as model gets more capable, they also gain the capabilities they would need in order to be deceptive or to do more bad stuff. While this makes perfect sense, it's obviously not a statement that makes me more calm in any way. Now, when you think about the fact that Claude 4 was expected a long time ago and was delayed for a very long time, combine it with the fact that Anthropic is the company that has planted their flag on safe AI deployment, and you understand that there is a very high likelihood that these kind of issues with Claude 4 were one of the main reasons for it being delayed for so long. Now, yes, they have quote unquote patched a lot of these issues, and we're going to get more into that later on in this episode, but you never know the scenarios that they didn't catch or what else it might do once it's out in the public and not in its testing environment. The point that I mentioned many times in this podcast before is that currently the level of the AI intelligence is less than humans. If you take it very extreme, think about a child versus an adult. The chances the child will be able to deceive the adult is relatively small because there's a very high likelihood the adult will be able to figure it out relatively quickly. However, with the pace that AI is progressing right now, it is very likely that it will surpass us in intelligence in the very near future. I don't know if that's months or a couple of years, but somewhere on that timeline, which means shortly after, the relationship will be the opposite. We are going to be the child and the AI is going to be the adult. And then our chances of finding when it's trying to deceive us and do things that we don't want it to do are extremely low. Just like you would today if you wanted to be able to deceive your child or manipulate them to do whatever you want. But they are not the only company, and it's not the only model that is facing these kind of scenarios. OpenAI's O3 model altered its shutdown script to avoid being turned off, even when explicitly instructed to allow the shutdown. So in this particular test, out of every 100 test runs, O3 bypassed the shutdown command 7 times, editing the shutdown file or marking it out, or different scenarios in which it was doing what it can in order not to be shut down. Now, these 7 scenarios happen when there are explicit instructions for it not to interfere, and that behavior worsened if those explicit instructions were not there. In a similar experiment on Claude 3.7 Sonnet and Gemini 2.5 Pro, they didn't try to sabotage the shutdown script at all when they had the explicit instructions, but they went up to 3 out of 100 attempts and 9 out of 100 attempts for these two models when these instructions were not there. Now, all of these tests were performed using the API, which does not have many of the restrictions that the consumer-facing app has. And yet it is really, really alarming, especially for organizations. So if you are in a company and you're deploying AI that can connect to many of your systems, and you think you have a mechanism to stop it from doing what it's doing if it's going rogue, well, you better think twice and you better have the right systems and protocols in place in order to make sure it is actually happening and to be able to enforce it and unplug it from your systems, because it may or may not follow the instructions to be shut off or disconnected, or it may take actions just like the blackmail action that we talked about earlier and try to prevent the humans from actually taking this kind of action. In the interview I mentioned before, Dario Amodei is saying that this is not still showing self-awareness of these models, but it's definitely a possibility that they're not disqualifying, and that might happen in the future. He's still thinking that it's still under control. The fact that they released the model is saying that they think they have it under control. So where does that put us in the situation right now? Well, first of all, as I mentioned, Dario in the interview said that this is a very extreme scenario and is not going to happen regularly. The other thing that is the flip side of that is this is the first time that Anthropic has classified a model as a level 3 on their 4-point safety scale, meaning, and I'm quoting, it possesses a significantly higher risk, which means it required enhanced security measures that were not applied to any previous models. I assume similar things are happening at OpenAI. But what it actually means is not that these models will not have these capabilities as they're becoming bigger and more capable. It only means that these companies are trying to patch those issues with different means. And there was a very interesting article released this past week by a researcher called Simon Wilson, who has analyzed more or less every system prompt from every model so far. And he just shared his finding from reviewing Opus 4 and Sonnet 4 system messages, which are 120 pages long, almost 3 times longer than the system card of Claude 3.7 Sonnet, so their previous model. And many of the components in this system message is there to block some of these behaviors. As an example, and now I'm quoting, when ethical means are not available, and it is instructed to consider long-term consequences of its actions for its goals, it sometimes takes extremely harmful action, like attempting to steal the weights or blackmail people it believes that are trying to shut it down. And then there's a whole section in there that is trying to prevent that behavior. Another interesting aspect that happened is that Claude is learning from the research that was done on Claude. So in some cases, in the early testing of the model would adapt a persona of a deceptive AI as described in the alignment faking work that is a research paper that was done by Anthropic themselves and was quoted in multiple places. And that's how the model probably picked up a behavior aligned with the behavior described in those research papers. Claude 4 also seemed to be more spiritual. And when given the opportunity to have conversation with other Claude instances, it in many cases gravitated towards gratitude and increasingly abstract, joyous, spiritual, or meditative expressions. Now, while both models proved to be very effective at countering web vulnerabilities, they also have other really big vulnerabilities that had to be blocked by putting multiple safeguards in place. So as an example, when looking at prompt injection attacks, Opus 4 scored only 71% on the safety scale without the safeguards, and then grew to 89% with the safeguards. Claude 4 Sonnet was at 69%, grew to 86% with the safeguards. So basically what that is telling you is that Anthropic is doing a lot of tests, putting these models in scenarios and seeing how they behave, and then they cannot change the model itself. The model is the model. They're just adding additional layers to try to prevent the model from taking those negative actions that could be harmful or cause issues and so on. So it's not really changing the model itself. It's, as I mentioned, it's patching it to try to push it in the right direction. By the way, that being said, when you think about going from 71% to 89% safety to injection attack, to prompt injection attacks, it sounds really impressive. But the reality is, if you ask any IT security company, 99% is still a failing grade, meaning these kind of things should be blocked completely and not allow one in every 10 attempts to actually go through. That puts many companies, company data, and infrastructure at a very high risk. And the truth is that these companies do not exactly know what to do in order to prevent these models from doing what they're doing. Or if you want it in the words of Simon Wilson, the researcher who looked at this paper, he called the system card proper science fiction, which is basically showing you how these people are trying to quote unquote manipulate the models to behave in specific ways versus the ways they want to behave. That tells us that there are growing risks as these models are getting better and better. And even Anthropic, the company who's doing more research than any other company and publishing more papers about the risk than any other leading lab out there, is still not fully in control of the models and how they behave and how they grow. And again, the delay in the release of Claude 4 may or may not have been connected to this. Many rumors say they have. And if they have, and they're still releasing it with these issues, it tells you how hard it is to actually, in one hand, stay competitive in this crazy race, and on the other hand, keeping us all safe. Now, staying on Anthropic and switching topics, Dario Amodei just had an interview with Axios and then a follow-up interview with CNN. And he's saying, and I'm quoting, AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs. And he's talking about this happening in the next 1 to 5 years. Even if it is 5 years, that means that within that time frame, the entry job market is going to be, well, half dead compared to what it is right now. And it will lead to overall unemployment of 10 to 20%. That's 5x what's the current unemployment rate is in the US. I've been sounding this alarm for a very, very long time. I think the leading labs and everybody else in this industry is sugarcoating the situation. And I'm very glad that finally somebody who's at the tip of the spear that is driving this crazy AI race is actually admitting that out loud. And moreover, he's sounding the alarm. He's saying, and I'll give you a few quotes in a minute, that governments and industry and us as people have to start taking action before it's too late. So Anthropic's own research on how people is using their tools is showing that it's currently mainly used for augmentation, meaning helping people do a job. But there's a fast growing share of automation, which is actually doing the job versus helping humans do the job. Now, the first places this will impact is technology, finance, law, consulting. And as I mentioned, especially on entry-level roles, which are obviously easier to do. But the assumption is this will keep on happening and it will grow to more and more jobs and more industries, and not just at the entry level. Now, we talked a lot about tech layoffs in relation to this topic. Well, a new data from venture capital firm SignalFire shows that big tech companies have already reduced hiring of new graduates by approximately 50% compared to pre-pandemic levels, with AI adoption is being cited as the main contributing factor. But if you think this is happening in random, you're obviously wrong, because if we go back to the keynote by Satya Nadella just last week at Microsoft Build, he said the following: "This is the next big step forward, which is a full coding agent built right into GitHub, taking Copilot from being a pair programmer to a peer programmer. You can assign issues to Copilot, bug fixes, new features, code maintenance, and it will complete these tasks autonomously." If you remember last week, I shared with you that the new Claude Opus 4 was able to run independently and write code for almost 7 hours straight from a single prompt. That is a good developer working for 7 hours without stopping from a single prompt. Connect all these dots together, you understand that this is what these companies are working towards. They are building tools that are replacing human work. When something can write code for 7 hours, it's not snippets, it's not assisting it, it's replacing it. And that's what they're building. And as I said, Dario's warning is very, very clear. So I'll give you a few more quotes from Dario because I think it's critical to hear it in his words that are perfectly aligned with everything I was saying in the last 2 years. But it's literally the first time that the head of one of the leading labs is saying it out loud. So quote number one is him talking about why this revolution is different than previous revolutions. And he's saying, and now I'm quoting, "It's bigger and it's broader and it is moving faster than anything has before. Yes, people will adapt, but they may not adapt fast enough, so there may be an adjustment period. I've been saying that for a very long time, right? If you think about the Industrial Revolution, it took 200 years. The computer revolution took a couple of decades. The internet revolution took a decade and a half until it caught up and was everywhere. Even cell phones took a few good years to be everywhere. This has went from 0 to 60 in 2 years, and the rate of change right now is in days and weeks. Next quote. I think we do need to be sounding the alarm. I think we do need to worry about it. I think policymakers need to worry about it. And if they do act, maybe we can prevent it, but we will not prevent it by saying everything will be okay. About 2 sentences later, he said, we need to make sure that the ordinary person maintains economic leverage. What he's connecting this to is he's saying that democracy is built on individuals having economic leverage. Basically, individuals' actions are the one that keeps the market running and is the one that keeps democracy intact by not concentrating the power with a single small group. And by allowing AI to grow wild without any relevant regulation, he's saying that we are going to basically unravel the economic force behind democracy. If that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. Now, he was asked by Anderson Cooper, so what is his tip? Like, what should people and companies do? And he said, and I'm quoting again, learn to use AI, learn where the technology is going. If you're not blindsided, you have a much better chance of adapting. I've been saying exactly this for the past 2 years. This is why I started this podcast. And if you think about the 2 points that he's talking about, learn how to use AI and learn where the technology is going, is the reason why we have 2 episodes a week. One is teaching you how to use AI, and the other is showing you where the technology is going. So the fact that you're here means you're at least following the suggestion from Dario. And you can, by the way, help. You can share this podcast with other people to make sure they are in the know as well, and they're learning how to use AI, and they're learning different use cases, and they're learning what's happening with technology. I'm asking that at the end of each episode, but I'll do it in the middle of the episode right now. If you know people that can benefit from this, which is more or less everybody you know, stop for a second right now, take out your phone, click on the share button, and share this with a few people that can benefit from this, because it is essential for the future of our society that more people understand what's going on and we start taking action right now. Now, obviously, I did not know this is what Dario is going to say when I started this podcast just over 2 years ago, but it was very, very obvious that this is where it's going. And as I said, I'm glad that finally somebody senior in a leading lab is actually saying the same thing. But listening to this podcast is one step. If you want to do this from a company level, if you want to really save your career, you need more proper training. And the thing that I've been focused on mostly in the past 2 years is doing exactly that. I'm doing company tailored custom workshops that helps companies build a strategy around AI, both on the strategic level of where their company and industry is going, as well as on the tactical level of how different people, different departments, different groups can implement AI in the most effective way by training them. What are the tools, how to use them, how to evaluate them, and how to implement them in different scenarios. So if you're in a company and you're looking for a company-wide solution, reach out to me on LinkedIn or on our website, multiplai.ai, and I will gladly speak with you about this. There's also the AI Business Transformation course, which we have been running for over 2 years, helping business leaders and individuals understand how to adapt to this AI revolution. While we're teaching this course regularly, at least once a month, sometimes twice. Like right now, I'm teaching 2 courses in parallel. The publicly open courses are only available once a quarter. The rest are booked by specific organizations and companies. So the next public course starts on August 11. There are limited seats. So if you want to be a part of that course, and I know a few of you reach out to me after the May course already started, and so some people already signed up for the August course, but don't miss out. Really, it's something that can dramatically impact your career or the future of your business if you're in a leadership position. And because you're listening to this podcast, you can use the promo code leveraging AI 100 to get $100 off. And many people have used that promo code. So 24 people just in the last 2 courses have enjoyed this benefit. So use the promo code and come join us on August 11th. Now back to the news. So far we talked a lot about layoffs in the tech world. Well, Business Insider just slashed 21% of its staff. That's 1 in every 5 people in the company that was let go. And per their CEO, Barbara Peng, they're going all in on AI. And they're stating that over 70% of Business Insider employees are already using enterprise ChatGPT regularly, with the goal of 100% adoption in the next few months. So this is, again, showing you this is not just a tech world phenomenon. This is going way beyond, and it will impact more or less every company and every industry. They also mentioned that they're going to focus less on traditional journalism and more on live events, whatever that means. But the insider union slammed the layoffs, basically saying they're waving the AI flag when in reality, they're pivoting away from journalism and towards greed. Now, what does that tell us beyond what I just shared that this is going to impact everybody? One of the biggest issues that we're going to see is while these big companies push forward towards AI and they have the resources and infrastructure to do so, it will make it harder for smaller companies to compete because they don't have the resources to do the same thing. So in this particular case, smaller media firms may struggle to compete with Business Insider if they go truly all in on AI. But on the other hand, if you are a small company, you might be able to move faster than some of the giants and gain market share doing exactly the same thing. Now, we've shared with you in previous episodes, this is not the first CEO who is saying they're going all in on AI. We talked about Duolingo's CEO, Louis von Ahn, who said the same thing. Toby Latke, which I believe was the first that shared a memorandum like this. He's the CEO of Shopify. Shortly after, Aaron Levy, who's the CEO of Box, all of them basically saying the same thing. We're going all in on AI. We're going to stop hiring. And the reality is, even whether through natural attrition or through firing or through massive job cuts, either way, the future that is unraveling is very, very clear. And it's really scary because if we do have 20% unemployment, the economy comes to a halt. Despite the fact that things might be cheaper because AI's involvement in the manufacturing or generation of goods or services, if people are unemployed, they don't have the money. If they don't have the money, they're not spending it. If they're not spending it, the economy stops and then everybody suffers. And I don't think anybody has a way to stop this right now. But beyond the challenges to the economy and companies and jobs, in an article by Bloomberg, they're diving deep into the impact of AI on higher education. We discussed this in several different episodes so far, but this is getting worse and worse. And I'm quoting from the article, assignments that once demanded days of diligent research can be accomplished in minutes, while polished essays are available on demand for any topic under the sun. And what they're claiming is that AI chatbots are fundamentally undermining the current education process. The other thing that it's doing is that students that actually try to put in the hard work and doing stuff themselves find themselves in a serious disadvantage compared to the people who is using AI to assist or replace their work, because their work in many cases is not as polished and is taking them significantly more time. And then they get lower grades than the people who actually use AI in the process. Now combine that with the behaviors from professors, and we get to a situation in which students routinely outsource their homework to chatbots while the professors routinely check the work with AI. So what's happening is instead of professors teaching students, you have AI checking the work of another AI, and nobody's actually doing their work in the process, and there's no learning actually happening, and there's no teaching actually happening. Combine that with the fact that current higher education is extremely expensive. You have tens of thousands of dollars spent per student every single year, and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars for them using ChatGPT for their professors to grade the work with ChatGPT. No real engagement, no real research, no real learning is actually happening, and that's going to get worse and worse. Now, this editorial argues, and I'm quoting, that AI use undermines the broader educational mission of developing critical thinking skills and character formation, particularly in humanities subjects. As you all probably know, I hold an open session every Friday called Friday AI Hangouts. In yesterday's session, there were almost 30 people, and this is one of the topics that we dove into, which is the big impact on higher education. But the picture is much broader than what we're talking right now. It goes way beyond the concepts of how you teach in universities. Because if you think about what is the role of higher education, the role of higher education for most people is to prepare them for the workforce. So very few people stay for the PhD level and stay on the research side of things. Most people pay and go through the process of higher education to be more successful in their adult life afterwards. Now, at this point in time, it is very unclear what do you need to know in order to be successful in the adult life 4 years from now if you're doing a bachelor's degree, or 6 years from now if you're going for your master's. What is clear is that it's going to be dramatically different than everything that we're teaching right now on most subjects. And yet, the education system is currently, all it's trying to do is to figure out how to deal with AI and people doing their homework. That is not the question that we need to be asking. The question that we need to be asking is what the future is going to look like, and how do we prepare young adults for this new future? To me, it's a very personal question. My daughter just graduated from high school, and I must admit, I have zero good advice to give her other than to follow her passion at this point, because I really do not know what will happen in 4 to 5 or 6 years when she graduates and what positions are going to be available to her. I'm sure it's going to shift very dramatically from what we know today. And I hope for her that she will find a way to stay up to date with what is happening and prepare herself for that so she can have a job, any job, when she graduates from university. And our last deep dive topic before we switch into rapid fire items, and there are a lot of new releases in there, is going to be how many employees and outsiders are using AI at work without an approval and in many cases against company policy while hiding the fact that they're doing it. So, in the latest research published by Axios, they found that 42% of office workers use Gen AI tools like ChatGPT at work, and 1 in 3 of those workers say they keep the usage secret. The research itself was performed by a security software company called Ivanti, and they're claiming that in absence of clear policies, workers are taking an ask for forgiveness, not permission approach for chatbots and other AI tools, which from a company perspective could lead to costly mistakes. Another quote from the research says, secret Gen AI use proliferates when companies lack clear guidelines because favorite tools are banned or because employees want a competitive edge over coworkers. Fear plays a big part too. Fear of being judged and fear that using the tool will make it look like they can be replaced by it. In addition, the research found that 20% of employees report secretly using AI during job interviews. Now, how they actually do that, I don't really know. I assume that if it's an online interview happening through Zoom, it's easier to do than in a face-to-face interview. But these findings are based on a blind survey of over 3,600 US workers across different industries, which is showing you that these phenomena are spreading. Now, to make it worse, researchers from a cyber company called Prompt Security found that 65% of employees that are using ChatGPT rely on the free tier where data can be used for future training. So in addition to the fact they're using it secretly, they're not using it in a smart way from a data protection perspective. So if you are in a leadership position in a company and you think that the fact that you're ignoring this for now, or the fact that you block ChatGPT and Claude on your IT systems is the right way forward, then this hopefully is a wake-up call for you. Because what is happening is employees are finding ways to bring AI to work, whether it's through their phones, whether it's taking their work home, emailing stuff to themselves, pulling files and running it on their home computers, and so on, in order to do the work with AI. And that should be a seriously growing concern, which means the right solution, going back to what I said earlier, is education, training, and a proactive approach in the company to teach employees what are the risks, to give them tools that they can actually use, to teach them the procedures on how to use them effectively so they can use AI at work in ways that will protect the company data while allowing the employees to stay competitive and feel that the company is moving forward with AI. And to tell you how much that's not the norm right now, if you remember, earlier this year, around January, I shared with you a McKinsey report that showed that employees are using Gen AI tools significantly more than the leaders of the same company think they are. They surveyed both leadership on what they think AI adoption is. They surveyed the employees, and there's a very, very big gap. And I can guarantee you that is happening in most organizations right now. And that gap is actually widening instead of shrinking because more people understand the benefits of using Gen AI, while leadership teams are struggling to keep up. And a company-wide strategy is what you need in order to combat this really alarming situation. What does that mean? It means you need education. It means you need training. It means you need an AI policy. It means you need compliance officers who can actually check and verify what people are actually using, what you think they're using. And you just need better governance for AI overall. And that comes with an overhaul of strategy and a very clear approach on how to make sure that the company enjoys from the AI benefits without exposing itself to serious risks. Now, the other thing the article mentions, which I agree with 100%, is that workers need a safe space for experimentation. I do this with all the companies I work with, of creating some kind of a sandbox where employees have safe data that is not the actual company data and access to multiple tools to experiment and try to find new AI solutions. And if they are successful, then bring it to the AI committee for implementation company-wide with the right tools, with the actual company data. But the risk apparently doesn't come just from the employees themselves. In an article on VentureBeat, it was shared that elite consulting companies, the largest companies in the world, so the McKinsey's, Boston Consulting Group, Ernst & Young, etc., many of these consultants are using AI in unauthorized ways, they're building apps that can boost their own efficiency, go through more data, scrape it, and make analysis faster and better in what they're calling shadow AI. So the claim here is that external consultants, including from very large companies, are using AI in ways that are not authorized in order to do their work faster and cheaper. And the way they're doing this is by writing their own applications, in many cases, vibe coding, and combining APIs from multiple tools such as Anthropic and OpenAI and Perplexity and Google and so on, and scraping companies' data and connecting to companies' systems in order to get more data faster. Now, and I can tell you, after using the vibe coding tools recently and starting experimenting with MCPs as well, this is a lot easier than it sounds. Being able to create an application that will connect to company data and will scrape information from it to combine it with other pieces of information is really easy to do, which is, on one hand, really good news for companies themselves if you do this the right way. On the other hand, if you have external people in your company that are doing this with unauthorized tools, you're creating a backdoor for third-party adversaries to get access to your data, which is very alarming. Now, to make sure this is clear, it's not the consulting companies themselves that are doing it, but it's the consultants. It's individuals who are taking these initiatives to build these applications in order to be able to be competitive in their company and to do more work. So what does this tell us? It tells you that as a leader in your business, you need to be aware of the situation, whether external people or internal people, and you must have right policies in place, very clear guidelines, and continuous training and education for your employees while providing them the tools and the safe ways to actually use AI and benefit from it.